This ancient Hindu temple is at the heart of a territorial dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. This year, tensions rose to breaking point, leading to several deadly military clashes along the disputed area. But some say the fight for this World Heritage Site has a lot to do with domestic political agenda rather than historic rivalry. I'm Fauzia Ibrahim. On this edition of 101 East, we look at the real issues behind the fight for the Preah Vihear temple. At the height of the Khmer Empire, 11th century Hindu worshippers walked a cobble path to the Preah Vihear temple. Heads bowed and chanting prayers, they climbed the steps to pay homage to the supreme deity Shiva, calling for protection for their families and loved ones. Through the centuries, thousands of devotees and visitors followed in their footsteps. But even Shiva could not stop the dark forces emerging around the temple. Preah Vihear sits on top of Southeast Asia's Dangrek mountain range, facing north towards Thailand. Cambodian ownership was first established in the early 1900s by its colonial ruler, France, and what was then known as Siam. But Thailand has never been happy with the agreement, and on several occasions has occupied the land around the temple. In a bid to claim the site once and for all, Phnom Penh took the matter to the International Court of Justice. In 1962, the court ruled the temple belonged to Cambodia, but said nothing about the 4.6 kilometers of land around it. Since then, Preah Vihear became a nationalist symbol on both sides of the border. The dispute ignited in 2008. In the lead-up to elections, Cambodia's leader Hun Sen successfully lobbied to have Preah Vihear listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The listing of Preah Vihear as a World Heritage Site was a big bonus for Hun Sen and the ruling party. Hun Sen was seen as a strong man who could defend the territory against a bigger neighbor. But it was intended to be a short-term popularity move. It was meant to gain popularity before the elections, but now the dispute has gone on for a bit too long for the liking of the ruling party.
While the World Heritage listing brought national pride to Cambodia, it also brought border tensions to a new deadly level. For the first time, armies on both sides engaged in fierce fighting, resulting in several military deaths. The sporadic clashes continued, but it intensified early this year, claiming more lives and displacing thousands of villagers on both sides. Chin Chorn and his team of Cambodian border police have been stationed here since 2008. They say Thai shells have damaged the ancient site.
The clash at Preah Vihear on February 4th was very fierce. Thailand used all American weapons, including cluster bombs. They also shelled us at night. They hit the temple in several places. You can see the holes in the walls and on the ground. We lost a few men here during the fight.
Chin Chorn says despite the unpredictable violence, he is proud to be defending the temple.
As part of a border police unit, I'm well aware of the dangers. We know the Thais have better and more modern weapons, but we are sworn to protect this temple, and we will do so at all costs.
NGOs claim Thailand is using cluster ammunitions in violation of an international convention banning the practice. Today, the Cambodian Mine Action Center has been called in to clear these farms of the deadly weapons.
We had previously cleared these areas of mines left behind from the Khmer Rouge War. But ever since the recent border fighting, we now have to go back and search these same areas for the cluster ammunitions that had been shelled over by Thailand.
Nan Bay says his team has cleared several areas of clustered munitions, but there is still a lot of ground to cover. It's estimated up to 5,000 families living close to the border could be at risk from these unexploded devices, particularly farmers tending to their land. The cluster ammunitions have already claimed several new victims. Among them is 30-year-old Kim Sam-nang, a border patrol policeman. He says a fellow soldier found a cluster bomb and brought it back to the unit. While handling it, the device exploded, killing 2 people and injuring 9 others.
I
didn't realize when it exploded. I heard it and saw a blue light in front of my face. I got hit right in my face, and I didn't even know. Then I realized that I couldn't open my eyes, only a little on my left eye. And my right arm was so heavy, I felt that it was stuck on the table and tried to pull it up, but I had no arm. It was gone.
Kim underwent several emergency operations to remove the bomb fragments, but he is not out of danger yet.
I have small fragments in my body. There are 3 in my head, some on the top of my head, some in my nose. These need to be removed. Life is very difficult because I lost my right arm. The arm which I used to write with and do so many things.
Despite his injuries, Kim says Cambodia must defend Preah Vihear against Thailand.
As part of the Border Patrol, I'm proud to defend our border. We Cambodians must defend our land. The Thai people are so desperate to win that they use cluster bombs. We must stand up to them.
At the Council of Ministers in Phnom Penh, spokesman Preah Vihear showed me Cambodia's war room, where top generals monitor the border events and devise military strategy. Preah Vihear blames Thailand for instigating the recent clashes, saying Cambodia does not want an all-out war with its neighbour.
You must understand that the Thai military started this recent clash without the endorsement of the Thai parliament. We acknowledge that Thailand is richer and more developed. We have always respected Thai interests and people here. We want to resolve the Preah Vihear issue diplomatically. But the Thai side is being uncivilized. They speak with guns and do not respect international laws. We are calling on the UN and ASEAN to help us against the Thai aggression.
But Bangkok refuses to allow a third party to mediate in the issue, claiming it can be resolved through bilateral talks. Phnom Penh, however, feels the international community needs to get involved to ensure a fair solution is found.
We don't believe anymore in bilateral cooperation. The Thai military attacked Cambodia. It was an act of aggression. They used heavy weaponry and tanks. They stationed their troops in front of Preah Vihear. We called for dialogue, but they refused. So we are looking to the international community to help us. The Thais have an international obligation to engage in peaceful talks with us.
Last month, leaders of the 2 feuding nations met on the sidelines of an ASEAN summit. Many had hoped both sides would be able to settle the border issue once and for all. But instead, the talks broke down, with both sides accusing the other of initiating the deadly clashes. Observers say the Thai-Cambodia border dispute is a test for ASEAN's effectiveness.
I think the UN Security Council will be more effective in resolving this issue. It's obvious ASEAN has failed. So bigger, more influential countries like the US needs to step in and put pressure on both sides to seek a peaceful solution. ASEAN is too weak because its member states do not want to get involved in each other's problems. ASEAN's credibility is at stake because it cannot even resolve a simple border conflict.
But while Cambodia cries foul, some analysts believe the border dispute is being used to further political ends.
It's important to note that Prime Minister Hun Sen's son, Hun Manet, is the commander of the whole conflict. He is overseeing the different factions and brigades. It's an opportunity for Hun Sen to raise the profile of his son as an able commander and most probably as an able leader. We are not sure if this is part of a succession plan for Hun Manet, but it does benefit Hun Sen and his family tremendously.
The accusation that Cambodia wants to promote Hun Sen's son to become a strong military figure or to earn popularity votes is fabricated information by Thailand. They are using all excuses to excuse their own actions. We are a small nation. How would it benefit us to engage in military action against our more powerful neighbor? Thailand has a strong military, a strong GDP. The Thais are trying to swallow us up through their military muscle.
But no matter the politics behind Preah Vihear, neither countries are allowing the matter to affect bilateral economic ties. Trade between the neighbors rose 35% to $716 million in the first 3 months of this year. This period coincides with the fiercest border clashes. As military and political tensions rise around the Preah Vihear region, here at Cambodia's official immigration point, it's business as usual. This country relies heavily on its powerful neighbors' investments and exports. Thailand sells petroleum, processed goods, construction materials, fruits, vegetables and cosmetics to Cambodia. In return, Phnom Penh exports agricultural goods, second-hand garments, recyclable metal and fishing products to Bangkok. And Thai gamblers provide Cambodian border casinos with a rip-roaring trade. While trade may be increasing, Thai tourist numbers have dropped. A few kilometers down the road, this tourist transit point remains empty. These immigration officers told us the number of Thai tourists has halved since border clashes intensified this year. They refused to speak on camera because of the sensitivity of the issue, but said the fight over Preah Vihear is pointless as the two countries share similar cultural and religious values. But back at the Preah Vihear border, Chin Chon does not share that sentiment.
Preah Vihear is not just our national heritage. For me, it is very precious to our land and our people, and no price can be put on it. I will always be here to protect this temple from the Thai people who want to rob us.
Earlier this year, both armies stepped up their attacks at the temple, using short-range rockets, guns, mortars and bombs. It intensified when the clashes travelled down the disputed border to the Thai village of Ta Mon Tom. In some of the fiercest fighting in years, at least 17 people died and scores were injured on both sides. Thousands of residents fled for their lives. We spoke to one of the villagers, 60-year-old Thanom Koprakon. She remembers a particularly heavy day of shelling, huddled helplessly with her 80-year-old mother and 3-year-old grandchild in their wooden shack.
When the shooting started, we were so frightened, but we could not run. My mother is very old, and I had my granddaughter with me, so we stayed in the hut. But I knew we needed better protection from the fighting.
Thanom told us she waited for a lull in the shooting before finding the courage to leave the hut. She then single-handedly constructed a bunker for her family.
I dug the ground, stacked up the wood, and covered it with soil. This was so that the shrapnel wouldn't hit us while we were inside. I don't know how I did it. I'm still surprised with myself. I think the shock and the fear gave me strength. I didn't feel the burden of carrying huge logs or the tightness from digging out the hole. It was unbelievable.
Thanom said the fighting continued for a week, and every time the bombing started, all three would run to the safety of the bunker.
Whenever we heard the big bombs, we lowered our bodies on the ground to avoid the shrapnel. My mother and my granddaughter were very brave. I was frightened. I kept praying Buddha would come to help and protect us.
Further down the road from Thanom's house, we met other villagers building bunkers. They told us they never thought the Preah Vihear conflict would become so deadly.
This is as close as we can get to the Preah Vihear temple from the Thai side of the border. No one, apart from military personnel, is allowed beyond this checkpoint. But it's the army's presence and the ongoing Cambodia-Thailand tension that has affected the livelihoods of many of the residents in this area.
Boakum Sri Saad once owned a thriving business selling memorabilia to tourists visiting Preah Vihear. But in 2008, when the temple was listed as a World Heritage Site belonging to Cambodia, the Thai military moved in and closed off access. The tourists stopped coming and her business collapsed.
When I had a shop in Preah Vihear, my fortunes were good. The Thai and Khmer vendors were all very good friends. We depended on each other. We helped each other. Then in 2008, the government said it was a conflict zone and chased us all out. I lost my business. I used to earn over $300 a day. Now, I'm lucky if I get $10.
Like other Thai residents along the border, Boakum wants the situation to be resolved peacefully.
I want life to go back to being normal. I want peace. I don't want the fighting. If there is fighting, both the Thais and the Khmers will lose. Solve the problem in a peaceful manner, but not with guns. The people in Thailand and Cambodia are no different. So we should stop fighting over this temple and share it like we did before.
But with both armies refusing to stand down, it doesn't look like tensions are easing anytime soon. We met with Thailand's Foreign Minister, Kasit Piromya, to discuss the ongoing conflict.
We have said it all along that we did not start the fighting. And I think there were only our responses to the, intensity of the fires. And then after that, I think
you're accusing Cambodia of starting
I
this
think
border
not exactly
dispute.
Accusing, but I think would be a statement of fact. And after that, it was like a premeditated undertaking, because immediately Cambodia went to the United Security Council. So it's somewhat sort of a synchronized act.
How would it benefit?
Start clashes in order to, because I think Cambodia would like the UN intervention. The Thai policy directions towards Cambodia for decades, and particularly under this government, is nothing but cooperation, development assistance, investment, trade, tourism, everything. We are, I think, more or less the giver to the whole socio-economic development of Cambodia. So there is no reason or there is no rationality whatsoever for the Thai society or the Thai government to be antagonistic.
But in your words, you said Thailand will not allow Hun Sen, a bully boy, to bully Thailand. Now that
I think sometimes sometimes political announcement is sometimes a reaction to what were being uttered out from the Phnom Penh side.
But you just called the Prime Minister of Cambodia a bully, though. That's not very diplomatic.
Right, but if you were to follow all the pronouncement, if you were to follow the press statements of the Cambodian government spokesman, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the utterances by Somdet Hun Sen for the past 1 year or 2 years, my one particular reaction to the utterances, very negative towards Thailand, is only one time. You cannot say that is my everyday practice.
Well,
I did say that in order to explain to the Thai public that we were being done by the Cambodian side all along. We never initiated.
But this border dispute certainly doesn't reflect very well on Thailand, given the recent clashes. If you look at it, Thailand's military is much better, far more advanced, better organized. The casualties have been more on Cambodia's side rather than on Thailand's
Well, I
side.
think we have done the defensive action, not the offensive. We did not bomb Cambodia. We did not move across the border. It's only the defense of the Thai border. And that has been the case all along. Never the first shot from the Thai side.
But the Cambodian government also denies initiating the recent clashes, claiming Thailand is using the border issues for their own political gains. In the capital, Bangkok, a vocal minority are lobbying strongly to keep Preah Vihear. The royalist group known as the Yellow Shirts are demanding UNESCO strip the temple of its World Heritage status and return it to Thailand. They are also urging Thais to boycott the July 3rd elections, claiming none of the country's politicians are interested in protecting the country's sovereignty. Surapa Kutawong felt so strongly about Preah Vihear, she left her home in northern Thailand to join the rally in Bangkok.
We lost the land so many times. The monarchy gave us this land. We love our king and the temple, and the land belongs to him. We want to get rid of this current batch of corrupt politicians who are not interested in getting back our land and temple. We want the king to choose his own politicians to form a clean government. We're not supporting this election.
The Thai military has a long history of influencing the nation's politics. With opinion polls pointing to a close election, analysts say the army could be using the border issue to maintain its position.
In Thailand, the military has quiet power. The contentious Preah Vihear issue is a rallying point for them to show the public that they are the main defenders of the monarchy, the nation and sovereignty. Their power depends on the outcome of the July elections. I believe there will be more street protests over the results, which will not be accepted by any losing side. That will give the military legitimacy to intervene and to install their own government like they did the last time.
But Thailand's foreign minister denies the issue is being used as a political tool.
This border dispute has also come at quite a convenient time for this particular government as well, is it? I mean, you can use it as an issue to raise nationalist sentiment for a government whose mandate is questionable. There's an election coming. This government is quite nervous when it comes to that.
You cannot question what you call the legality of this government. My prime minister was elected by the people. My prime minister was elected by the parliament.
Well, some would dispute that.
No,
in terms
it's
of
too
legal.
bad. It's too bad. But I think we play by the rules of the game. And the games are stipulated in the Constitution.
Is this border issue being used to raise nationalist sentiment?
No, we have been a very transparent government. I or my Prime Minister appeared on parliaments all the time. We explain everything that we do in the open. We believe in democracy and then we do practice. We are not an autocratic. We do not need nationalistic sentiment to win votes. We don't need votes to go to war. We're not a third world banana republic country. We are not.
But with both sides refusing to back down, analysts warn the border tensions could have a wider impact.
At this moment, the conflict is staying on land, but it has extended beyond Preah Vihear. There's skirmishes all along the Thai-Cambodia border. If it is allowed to continue, it could reach the maritime border. There is a lot of oil at the other disputed zone within the Gulf of Thailand. This conflict could extend to a maritime showdown between the two countries.
With Cambodia and Thailand engaged in peace talks, negotiations are stalled over which side should stand down their armies first. Meanwhile, this once Hindu sacred ground remains a military zone, and the villages on both sides remain in the crossfire.